there's an assumption that many of us make, I would venture to say in general, but certainly that we've made over the last several weeks, and that assumption is hashgacha pratit exists on the individual level. That divine providence of God either determines the outcome or at least governs some sort of involvement that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has on the lives of each and every individual and every circumstance that they find themselves in. When I'm speaking to soldiers and I see them going off the base, I say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should guard them, should protect them, Shem Yishmor Tzedcha Uvoecha, should look after them. And of course, I'm taking for granted that this divine, all-knowing, all-powerful, cosmic being is watching the daily lives of every single person in this world and governing what happens, or at least has the control over what happens and can intervene and will intervene if he sees necessary. Now, that's an assumption it's clear that David HaMelech made, perhaps, as we take those words from David HaMelech. David HaMelech says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hinei lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael, Hashem yishmorcha mikol ra, yishmor nafshecha, Hashem yishmor tzedcha avoecha me'ata v'ad olam. God should protect you in coming and going, now and forever, protect you from all bad things. Taking for granted this idea, or at the very least, David HaMelech is under the assumption that HaKadosh Baruch Hu guards and protects us on an individual level. But there seem to be many Rishonim who take a much more limited perspective on what Hashgacha Pratit actually is. So the Ran, for example, says, by and large, HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows the world to go in accordance with nature. He allows nature to take its course, and he intervenes in rare circumstances where he sees it uniquely necessary, or for a person who is uniquely deserving. The Rambam and the Ralbag similarly say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is governing the big picture, let's say. He's certainly governing the world, and that there wouldn't be catastrophic events or an extinction of a species, let's say. But when it comes to individuals, most people do not have some sort of individual divine providence. But the closer that you get to God, essentially, the closer God is involved in your individual life on a daily basis. There are those who take a more expansive approach, though. The Ramchal says that every member of Klal Yisrael has Hashgacha Pratit, has individual divine providence, and more than that, but any individual who is impacting Klal Yisrael, whether good or bad, also may have individual divine providence. So in the circumstances where we're interacting with the Umot HaOlam, who are going to have a positive or negative effect on us, those people who are doing something to us or for us also may have divine providence. The Sefer HaChinuch takes it one step further and says every person has divine providence. Kadosh Baruch Hu is looking after and intervening and inserting himself into the lives, into the circumstances of every individual. The Ramban finally goes a step further and says all Ba'alei Chaim, anything with life, Kadosh Baruch Hu is looking out for them. Even animals and even the tiniest of insects. The Kadosh Baruch Hu is cognizant of what's going on in their existences and intervening whenever necessary. Another question to ask is not just for who there is divine intervention, but to what degree is there divine intervention? What does it mean? What does that divine intervention look like? So the Ralbag, again, takes a very limiting approach. And he says God's intervention is giving you the tools to handle the situation, right? While God is aware of certain, not meaning he's aware, but while God intervenes in the lives of certain individuals, what that intervention looks like is essentially just giving you tools to work it out yourself. Some people lack the tools, but you'll have the tools. Now, those could be instincts and those could be skills. You're helping yourself. That's your divine intervention. The Ramchal, on the other hand, takes a much more expansive approach, one that we have looked at together in the past, which is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu governs and dictates the circumstances of everything that happens, of all of reality, moment by moment, situation by situation, person by person. HaKadosh Baruch Hu determines what will happen to them. Right? And this has tremendous support from the Gemara as well. And we saw this in the past, or in the Midrash, that the Torah says a person, the falling person will fall off the roof. That's why you need to put a gate on it. You need to put a gate on your roof to protect the falling person who might fall off your roof. And the Midrash asks, why are you already calling him the falling person? He hasn't fallen yet. Answers the Midrash, he was always supposed to fall. That was always supposed to happen. You didn't make that happen to him. That was always supposed to happen. If you merit it, then you don't have to be the person, on whose hands that tragedy comes, by whose hands that tragedy comes. But if you're negligent, then what's supposed to happen to him will happen through you. Nonetheless, God is governing all circumstances. Now, this calls into question a pretty fundamental concept within Jewish thought, which is the concept of free choice, right? The Gemara says as well, Kol bidei shamayim chutz miyirat shamayim. Our ability to choose is the only thing God does not control. But according to the Ramchal, God apparently determines the outcome of every single individual circumstances and what happens and how it happens on a moment-by-moment basis. It's a very difficult concept to navigate. The Ramchal says we don't understand it and we're not exactly privy to this aspect of God's intervention, but know that it's happening. What you feel, what you see is your choice. But on a deeper level, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is manipulating the circumstances so that even your choices ultimately end up in the result that he wants. Right? You can divide in the Ramchal's thought and the Ramchal's idea between the choices which you make and the outcomes that God controls. There is something of a minority and even an individual opinion of Rav Noam Elimelech, who says, no, even your choices are being controlled by God, because God determines and discerns the outcome of every single event, and even down to the choices that you're making. This, of course, is not a particularly wide-held belief within Jewish thought, but nonetheless, it exists within the spectrum of to what degree does God control the outcome of each circumstance. Is he just giving us tools? Does he allow us to make our choices, but intervenes on the level of the outcome? Or does he even intervene on the level of the choice that we're making? Now, all of this may not be relevant for what's going on right now. All this may not be relevant for the question of what's happening with our soldiers in the field and what's happening with the terrorists and what's happening with Eretz Yisrael. And this is because we've been discussing Hashgacha Pratit on an individual level. But when it comes to Klal Yisrael as a nation, and specifically Klal Yisrael as a nation in Eretz Yisrael, there seem to be there's different rule book. There's a different way, there's a different nature that Klal Yisrael is subject to. What I mean by that is as follows. The Gemara says, Ein Mazal Yisrael. What that means fundamentally is that most nations, there is some sort of natural law that governs them. It's not exactly chance, but some of them will have their moment. They'll have their 15 minutes of fame. One will be in power, then the next will be in power, then the next will be in power. And it's nature taking its course. That's what all other nations are subject to. But for Klal Yisrael, that's not the case. Ein Mazal Yisrael means that there's no governing natural law looking out for Klal Yisrael. It's only a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And God determines what happens to Klal Yisrael. God determines do we have rain? Do we have food? Do we have crops? Are we winning this war? Are we losing this war? Everything when it comes to Klal Yisrael is not up to natural law. It's up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's own decisions. And specifically, the Torah says that God's eyes are always on Eretz Yisrael. He watches what happens from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and he governs all that happens. So while we can have this discussion on the individual level, on a national level, it seems that our well-being and our success, broadly speaking, maybe not for this individual soldier, for this individual victim, for this individual person, but at least on a natural level, Kadosh Baruch Hu is determining the outcome of Klal Yisrael's success. This is a point the Ramban goes at length to clarify, that when it comes to the well-being of Klal Yisrael, when it comes to our food, our health, our success, our military, our government, everything is Lamala Min HaTeva. Everything is controlled and manipulated by God. We can discuss whether that's true on an individual level or just on a collective level, but when it comes to the situation that we're in, the war that we're in, and what we're fighting, and how we're fighting, and what happens to us, explains the Ramban at length that Klal Yisrael is on a different system. We're not subject to the natural outcome of what might happen in any given situation. And this is something I'm sure that many of us have felt, either personally or learning history. It seems that no matter what is stacked against us, the armies on the other side, the might on the other side, the chances that we have, it never seems to matter. When Kadosh Baruch Hu wants us to win, when that's what's meant to happen, we win in spite of all odds. It's not the natural law that we're subject to. It's Lamala Min HaTeva. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is navigating, is governing everything that happens to us on a national level.